storage. If you record it to the cloud, that means you're recording it to a external source, which sometimes you have to pay money for.
Okay, I'll record it to my computer.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. Continue.
No
Sorry
worries.
to interrupt.
No worries. But doing all this coaching for our racing team athletes, for these middle school athletes and high school athletes, we always talked about making sure as the greatest equalizer of any running activity or any race is fatigue. And if you have the ability to look to drills and to certain cues while doing your running or even walking, you have the ability to put your body into better form. And what it winds up doing is reducing stress on feet, ankles, knee, hip, and lower back. And so we'll talk more about that as we get into the drills that I'm going to go through tonight. But there's some silver linings that come through everything in life. For the fact that I'm getting together with 25 plus people tonight via Zoom. Who would have thought that this is a silver lining of COVID, that we can actually still create community while not having to be able to be in community? And hey, Sherry's in Florida and she's still attending the meeting. That's to me, that's a silver lining. You guys will remember probably about 10 or 12 years ago, there were these 5-finger shoes that were out. Vibram made them, and I believe to all the podiatrists and orthopedic surgeons I knew, they were a windfall of cash, simply because so many people were getting injured from going out and saying, these are the silver bullet. They were reading a lovely book like Born to Run. So reading this, and in this book, it talked about barefoot running, and barefoot running will be the salvation of any aging athlete in the world, bar none. And so people would go out, they'd take off their shoes, they would run without their shoes and socks on, and your heel would hit the ground the first time and you would swear, but your body would put itself into a better position. Now, again, fatigue being the greatest equalizer of all of this. As soon as you start to fatigue out, then eventually you're going to start hitting in a bad position again. So when Vibram came out and they wanted you to run in these shoes that had no cushion, it was just designed to protect your foot from asphalt, glass, whatever else was on the ground. It did drive in one thing, form. And that's the key of all of this is form. And then we see the industry change, and you go away from these minimal shoes like the Vibrams and all of these shoes that had no cushioning whatsoever. And then you go to the maximal shoes. And then you have things like Ultra and Hoka come onto the scene, and they're teaching different geometry. So when we look at the original Hoka shoes and we look at the original Ultra shoes, what you're seeing is that there's zero drop to these shoes. So you have the ability to land differently. So you can disperse shock differently and protect your body a little bit differently. So all of these things kind of changed. I mean, when the guys, Jean-Luc and Nico, who started Hoka, when they first came out with the shoes, they were over-engineering them for downhill European cross-country races. So starting at 4,000 feet and racing straight downhill and through towns down to like 2,000 feet or 1,000 feet. So you're literally going downhill. And if you're going to be hitting downhill, you're going to be crashing onto that heel. So they needed to have something to disperse shock. And that's how that shoe first started. Jean-Luc was the president of Salomon at that time in France, and Nico was the director of marketing of Salomon at that time. And they came up with this idea while working at Salomon and decided to leave Salomon and started Hoka. And now Hoka, everybody on the call heard of Hoka? Yeah.
Ran in them tonight.
Went from not being a brand 11 years ago, now 12 years ago, to being a rapidly approaching $1 billion brand. Who can tell me who owns Hoka? Who? Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Oh yeah, I have Hoka. I don't even remember what the name of it is.
Deckers. Yeah. Do you know who the group that owns the company Hoka?
Deckers.
No idea.
Deckers. And what else does Deckers own?
UGG.
UGG. That's correct. So UGG and Hoka are owned by the same parent company, and they were the first. And Hoka was the first company to have a female president of a running shoe company. Wendy Yang was the first female president of a running shoe company. An amazing history for that company. And it all started because they were trying to change geometry so people could be running with good form. So there's a lot of things that kind of that get to a different point from where they start. You know, the whole idea of, you know, Born to Run, and Chris McDougall's book was telling a story of the Indians in Mexico and how they ran without shoes, and how putting your body into a certain position allowed you to be able to connect with the ground in a way to be able to disperse shock better. To shoes, the companies that are now making shoes that also help you do that. So what we're going to go through tonight is we're going to go through the principles of good form. And this applies to running, and it also applies to walking. And we'll get into it. And we're going to start with these three principles. We teach a fourth as well, and I'll get into that one at the end, but it's really posture, landing, and lean. So we're going to talk about those three things of posture, landing, and lean. And the fourth is the cadence concept, the idea of being able to run at a certain turnover, at a certain rate, to put your body into that position. So I'm going to stand up, and hopefully my camera will be able to show me on this, and you'll be able to hear me on this. I will go back into my little gym that I have here, and we're going to start with the way that good form works. Is it works starting at your feet. It works starting at your feet, and it sounds ridiculous, but through posture, we're going to start at the feet. So remember, posture, we're going to talk about landing, and we're going to talk about lean. So when we talk about posture, and I went with very dark socks. Can everybody see me okay? Okay, excellent. So the first thing we want to talk about is when you are running or walking, you want your feet to be facing forward. Okay, I know that sounds foreign, but forward, because you will see people where they will run like this. And you will see people and they'll be pigeon-toed and they'll run like that. Or you'll see people and they'll be going with their arms all over the place. You want to start with your feet facing forward. Above your feet, you have your knees. Your knees are the largest shock absorbers in your body. They're dispersing the shock that you're creating by making contact with the ground. So we want your knees to be soft. We don't want your knees to be hard and rigid. We want your knees to be soft. When you're landing, you want to have a little bit of bend in your knee, whether you're running or walking. On top of your knees, you have your hips. To me, this is the key to the whole thing, is from here to here and from here to here, also known as your core. You want your core to be strong, which is why we do our core work, which is why we do our stretching. But we want our core to be strong because we want our hips to be forward. We do not want to have our hips externally rotated. We call this running or walking with your butt in a bucket. And that's what fatigue will do. That you will see that you will be in form, and you'll be up and running, and then you'll start to get more and more tired, and you'll use your entire body to run, and you will start to extend your butt out, and you'll be running in this direction. You want to feel like you're running with a rope coming out of your belly button, pulling forward, not externally rotating. So when you're thinking about your run, and you're thinking about the energy and the flexibility that you have in your run, think of you if you get tired and you start to externally rotate and you go to put your knee up when you're running, you can get it about this high. You get your core engaged, you get your hips forward, you can get your knee up so much higher with no effort. In this position, you can't even get it higher. So now we're talking about striking the ground 1,700 times per mile, or 4 to 10 times the force of your body weight on top of it, depending on it, if your activity is walking or running. So if you have your hips forward, you can use so much less energy to propel yourself forward. So the deeper you're getting into your run, the more you want to be able to be thinking about having your hips forward. That is our lower body. Now we go to our upper body. Our upper body, we have our arms. Whoa, 25 years of doing this. Another, what do we have on top of that? 18 years of being a runner prior to that. I have seen arms in all sorts of directions out there when people are running. I've seen people run with wonderful things like this in their hand, where this arm stays steady, but this one is going like crazy the entire time. Your arms are so pivotal because your arms should be matching the stride of your feet. If your feet are striking the ground 1,700 times per mile, your arms are going to be moving 1,700 times per mile. So when we think about our arms, we want to think about our arms being at our shoulders, and then that's where all the motion happens. We don't want any sort of rotation. We want everything starting at our shoulders. So what we will think about as we're doing this, and you're more than welcome to do it with me, is that you want your arms to move in this direction where all the motion is happening from the shoulder. And then what we do is we put our arms in a 90-degree angle, and that's how we run. With our arms next to our body, not out like this, not in like this, not crossing, but our arms working together. So think about it like you have a gallon of milk in each hand, and that's the motion that you want. And then you move your hands into that 90-degree position, and the motion is all coming from the shoulder, not from the elbow, like a train. I mean, because I've seen this happen all the time where people are running in this direction. You want it to be nice and smooth. It's moving. Put your shoulders down. Pull through the back. It's not up in your ears. Women have a tendency to do this a little bit more than men because women are wearing something called a bra, which is a piece that is also constricting. So I've seen women who run like this all the time. Arms up, like they're about to punch themselves in the jaw. You want that motion to be on either side. I know I'm belaboring a point here, but when you think about your arms are a lever that can throw your body in different directions. So what I will tell you about your arms is that you want to draw a line from your nose to your belly button, that your arms never cross. They don't go across it. They stay on their own side the entire time. And the motion is happening from the shoulder. Okay. Our hands. Wow. I've seen runners' hands in all sorts of different iterations when running. I've seen them have all of the blood squeezed out of them when going and doing an event. And that just creates tension all the way up the back. You should run like you have a potato chip in between your index finger and your thumb on each hand. Light, and they should be up. I tell my younger athletes, especially the ones that are in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that their rhythm should be like they're playing a drum. Boom, 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 boom. Like a drumstick in each hand, a rhythm that is just going in this direction. And again, they can be out here, they can be closer in. It's where you're comfortable. It all depends on your own biomechanics and your physiology, but you just want to make sure that they're not crossing over. You don't want to be in that position. You want to be light, relaxed, shoulders relaxed, etc. So that's our hands. Next, our head. If you have not run with a baseball cap on, I would suggest once running with a baseball cap on. And you want to make sure that your head, okay, this is ridiculous to say, but I say it every time, that your head stays on top of your shoulders. Okay, you don't want your head falling off your shoulders. But what I mean by that is you want to have your head straight on your shoulders, not cocked to the side, not cocked to the other side, straight up and down. And the brim of a cap will help with that quite a bit. If you see it bouncing up and down, if you see it listing to one side or the other, then you know that you need to be able to go straight ahead. The other thing about it is this thing called bounce. And if you see your head bouncing up and down, if you have a Garmin or other devices, they can talk about bounce. They can show you stride, they can show you turnover, and they can also show you bounce. And you want to make sure that as you're running, your head is not bouncing up and down. It's staying as flat and level as possible. That bounding up and down activity is energy that you're not putting going forward. The more you go up and down, the slower you're getting. You want that energy going forward. And you will see a lot of athletes where they don't have their feet on the ground at the same time, they're actually up in the air. But you will also look at these athletes and their heads are perfectly still. Their upper bodies are slow. Their arms are staying on their own side. I know that's a lot of information. I know that is a ton of information, and we're only on point number one. That this is just talking about posture. But we created this really cool thing, and where this all started with is with not only the 5 finger shoes. I worked with a group out of Michigan, a bunch of guys at Playmaker Sports up in Michigan. And one of the guys who came into this group, this was a New Balance thing that we were doing. There was an athlete named Grant Robeson. Grant Robeson is a Olympic 1600 meter athlete. He talks about that he has poor form. The guy has run a 354 mile, and he talks about how he has bad form and how the faster athletes are so much better than him. These are guys that are in the 340s. You know, the guy made the Olympics. Guy was in Australia at the Olympics. I mean, and he was getting injured, and he came and started working with our group. And what we talked about is looking at his posture, and he's like 6'2", and you would see his head bounding up and down and going all over the place. And so when working with him, we came up with this thing called the reset. And the reset is simply when you're in the middle of a run, that you reach your hands up as high as you can over your head like a diver as you're in the middle of your run, and then you bring them back down. So you could be in the worst position in the world running, and then you go into the reset and everything comes into place. Your hips go forward, your shoulders come down, your head can't go anywhere but look straight forward, and your knees and hips and everything below will come into line. Last time I ran New York was 2011. It wasn't a particularly fast race for me, but I ran the first half 30 seconds faster than I ran the second half. It was almost perfect splits between the first half marathon and the second half marathon. And during the second half marathon, I stopped at every water stop and walked. And I did a reset at every single water stop that I came into and left, resetting my body, getting my body into the right position. So getting your feet forward, your knees in the right position, your hips forward like a rope coming out of your belly button, and your upper body in the right position by literally just running with your hands in the air for like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, will put everything back into position. This works for walking as well as running. If you see you're going out and you're doing a power walk, you're going for a longer distance walk, reach up, put your arms above your head, and put your body back into position. That is posture. The biggest part of all of this, it's the biggest drills that you do. I hope to be out in front of you doing this together, because there's some drills that we do with amplification, and we'll get into that in a moment, but they really do work. But when you're going out and you're running on Saturday and you're starting to feel a little fatigued, literally just reach up for a few seconds and you'll feel everything come into place. That's posture. That's drill number 1. Drill number 2 is mid-foot landing. Mid-foot landing. So I know it sounds simple, but so many people have a tendency to overstride and land on their heels. And when you land on your heel, do you know what we call this when you're in a car? We call it braking. That you're actually slowing yourself down when making contact with your heel on the ground. And that's going to be bad for any athlete, whether walking or running. You don't want to be in this position, overstriding, okay? So what I do when I teach this class live is I have everybody stand up, and if you want to do it, you're more than welcome to do it. That we want to land midfoot. So we're going to do, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go on our heels. Just stand up and walk on your heels and see how that feels. It doesn't feel very good. And that's what you're doing when you're overstriding and landing on your heel. You want to be on that midfoot. Now march in place. That is literally how you want to run, is by marching in place. The difference between walking, running, and standing and marching is simply speed. That's all it is. The position should be about the same, but the speed and turnover is what kind of changes it. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, the next thing I want you to do, you can stay standing, is I want you to go up on your toes, because some people are like, I don't land on my heels, I land on my toes. Well, if you get up on your toes and try and walk on your toes, I don't know how long you could do that. That's going to fatigue out those calves. So we want to make sure that you're landing on that midfoot. And why do you want to land on that midfoot? Because what it does is it gets your body into a position where you're making contact with a little bit of bend in your knee. Again, largest shock absorber in the body. You want to land with a little bit of a bend in your knee. So your foot, your ankle, your knee, your hip, and your lower back are all in line, because this is the position that we call running. So when you land on your midfoot, doesn't matter what side, you land on your midfoot, that knee always bends a little bit, and you have the ability to have that ankle, knee, hip, lower back, all in line. So that midfoot landing is key, because so many people have a tendency to overstride. Their foot is out in front of them. You'll see pictures of it where you see people will be in this position running. They'll say, well, I'm supposed to be upright. I have my hands on either on their own sides, but now all of a sudden their knee is locked out, and you're putting all this jamming force into your knee. So we don't want that. We want to be in this position of a midfoot landing. And how do we get there? And this is the piece I'll just tap onto for a little bit, is by shortening our stride. We want to be able to shorten our stride, because what happens when we overstride is that heel makes contact with the ground. But when we shorten our stride, people are like, well, I'm tall. I use my stride, my long legs to my advantage. Well, you can. We don't want your long stride to be in front of you. We want your long stride to be behind you. So when you look at those elite athletes, those fast athletes, you see them, their heel is almost hitting their butt. They have that long stride that comes through.
Right. Yeah.
They don't go out in front of them. They're using all of that energy underneath them to create that lever to throw them forward. It's not in front, it's behind. So when people are saying, when I say shorten your stride, all I'm saying is you don't want it to be in front of you, you want it to be behind you. And the only way to achieve that is to do it by trying to land on that midfoot, because if you're going to land on that heel, you're going to slow yourself down a little bit, and you want to make sure that you're not doing that. You want to land in this position. So the drill I teach to my athletes are march in place, march in place, march in place, and see what that feels like. And then start making your move, and we'll run around the park. And what I do is I put it onto a cadence, and the cadence that I like is 180 strides per minute. So it sounds like that. And it's very difficult to do in my little gym down here, but that's a stride that you want. You can do it while marching in place. You can do it while doing a 12-minute mile. You can do it while doing a 5-minute mile. The only difference is going to be how much distance you get behind you with your stride. And that is the kind of the very ethereal concept of this, is like, okay, now I have to be thinking about beats. I have to be thinking about beats per minute. No, all we want you to do is be able to shorten that stride a little bit so it feels like it's behind you. If you have a tendency to get ankle problems or shin problems, you're probably overstriding. If you have a tendency to get into runner's knee, you're probably overstriding. If you have a tendency to get into plantar fascia problems, you're probably overstriding. Try to shorten that stride out in front of you, get it underneath you, get it longer behind you. And the best way to do that is at approximately 180 strides per minute. You can use, I use something called run tempo. That's what I teach my athletes with. And I put it through a speaker. It drives them insane, but it works. And so listening to that every once in a while, put it on through your headphones and try and shorten that stride a little bit. The last thing I want to talk about is body position for the lean. When you are running, you want your weight going forward. Running has been called a controlled forward fall. And when you're running, you don't want to be in the position where you're leaning backwards. You want to be where you're going forward. At least that's all the races that I've done. There's nobody going like this. Everybody's going forward. So what you want to do, and the way you want to be able to create your stride, is by doing this drill. And this drill is called the lean. And the lean happens not from the midsection, not from the knees. It happens from the ankles. You want your lean to be from your ankles, so you can feel that you're engaging that core and you're leaning forward, your arms are in a running position, and then you take your stride. The stride that I just took is about as long a stride as I ever want to take when I'm running. I'm not on my heel. You can see my knee is bent and my body is positioned over my knee and my ankle. You want to be leaning forward. You want that forward lean to happen from here. Again, you can see a little bit of lean, chest is out, just a little bit in front. That's the stride. That it takes practice. That takes practice, because you will feel that you are engaging your core. And you want your core engaged from here to here, and from here to here, and from here to here. Critical for walking and running when looking to be able to increase speed and be able to reduce injury. So it is posture, it is a midfoot landing, and it's a lean forward while trying to think about this cadence at about 180 strides per minute. Could be 175, could be 183. If you get into the 160s, 150s, most likely you're overstriding. So you want to be able to be thinking about those things. Posture, midfoot landing, a lean, and think about that 180 beats per minute. From here, that's about the best that I have the ability to show you guys. But if you have any questions about it, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this point. But I hope that was helpful.
That was good.
Thank you.
A lot of people are muted, so unmute your phone if you want to ask a question.
If you're trying to transition to the 180 beats per minute kind of stride, what's the best way to do that? How?
So that's a great question. A couple of ways to be able to do it. I always find that being able, if you have a watch that can record that for you and get a baseline as to where you're at, that's a great way to start. So you know what you have to kind of change. I think it really is going to be the idea of shortening the stride and being really awkward for a few runs. It does feel very, very awkward. But I would also, when I teach this in a live setting with the drills, it is going around the park with an amplified system where you're learning how to be able to land on your midfoot by hearing the beat. So again, the program that I use is called Run Tempo. It's an app. You send that to your set that to your headphones, and you just turn it on every once in a while and see how close you are to it.
Recycling data is anchor for the close, and so we can recycle.
So I'm not sure if I heard another question there. Somebody is unmuted.
I have a question.
Okay.
What if you run with water? Like you have to run with water because there's no drinking fountains around anymore. So and I usually run with water. How would you propose you carry your water?
I would say this is going to sound like a joke. Keep it fluid. If you have water and you carry it in your hand, just be cognizant of the fact that you need to be moving it. It can't stand still. It can't stay still when you're doing it. It has to be in motion, and that's fine. And switch it from side to side every mile or so, so you feel like you're balanced on either side. You can run with water and still be doing everything properly. The point that I made about the phone is that for some reason, it may be the idea that some of us still believe it's the 1990s and we're running with a Discman and we don't want to shake the CD and have it skip. So we just keep it nice and nice and steady, and we don't have to worry about shaking these things. They'll just do just fine. But just try and be cognizant of the fact that your hands shouldn't cross the center section of your body. If they're out here on the side and they're not perfectly symmetrical, that's fine. Your left side and your right side are not perfectly symmetrical. You write with one hand, you throw with one arm, you throw a bag over one shoulder, you're not symmetrical. So let's just, it's been something I've been fighting the footwear industry for the last 25 years, that bodies are not symmetrical. That's why we just introduced this thing called May3D, which is a 3D printed insole, which does it based on your left side and your right side. It looks at it dynamically in motion, correcting and putting your foot in the right position based on your left side and your right side. I just had my left knee replaced and I had to throw out my old insoles and get them redone because my gait is so much different because my left leg is now longer than it was 2 years ago. So I had to make an adjustments for that. And by the way, it didn't come from running. It came from really shitty DNA is where it came from.
Dave,
Other questions?
Dave, are you running on that artificial knee?
I am. Yeah, not a lot, but I am. I was out there. I did the 6th anniversary run with the Oak Park group a few weeks ago. I'm trying to, don't tell my wife, I'm trying to train for a half Ironman. So
What did your surgeon say about that? Or did you ask?
my surgeon and I have a very realistic relationship. He knows who I am and what I do for a living, and he knows that he can't tell me not to run. But he just said, realize that I'm 55. He said, if you run, be prepared to get another knee in your early to mid 60s. If you don't, it should last somewhere between 13 to 15 years. If you run once a week, twice a week, you'll be fine. You'll replace it in 12, 13 years. He goes, if you run a marathon a year, you'll be back to see me in somewhere around 8 to 9 years.
Good
So
news.
he's yeah, so that's he knows who I am and understands it. I know I'm going to have to get one more knee replacement on each side by the time this wonderful life is done. But I also know that getting it 2 more times, there's not going to be a lot of material there to work with. But I'm hoping that I'm in my late 70s when we get there.
Thank
I have
you.
a question about,
I was just gonna ask, when you were talking about the posture where you make sure that your hips are forward.
Yep.
And when we get tired, we tend to let it go back. With the hips forward, this sounds kind of silly, but are your gluteus maximus is tight when you're
So you can,
forward?
they're tighter. They're not flexed, but they're engaged. So one of the things that happens with running athletes is we don't do a really good job of making sure that our glutes or our glute med or our glute max are strengthened. So being able to do those core strength exercises, keeping them engaged is key. And I will squeeze basically like a Kegel to be able to pull the core together, which then will engage the glute as well and the piriformis.
So it's okay to have them tight then?
Yeah, it's okay to tighten them up a little bit. I just wouldn't be flexing them the entire time because again, that's good. First of all, if you have somebody that you're looking to impress, go ahead. Don't worry about it.
Not my age, thanks.
But the idea of having the core engaged a bit is good. So if you decide that if for a 2 or 3 second stretch that you want to flex and really engage them, that's fine. But then go back to a relaxed state. Sometimes when finishing races, I will completely engage my core, and that's how I will get my hips forward in order to sprint that last 200, 400, 100, whatever it is.
Great, thanks.
My pleasure. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Hi, Dave. I'm Mary Alice. Hi. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around the whole cadence thing. I just download that app that you told us about because I have a couple of playlists, and for some reason that said if you want to run a 12-minute mile, these songs have beats that you should follow.
Yep.
But how does that make a difference if you are at your 180 that you said strides?
Mhm.
So someone faster can do 180 or slower still do 180?
So you can look at, so for example, something that's at a 90 beats per minute is 90 times 2, 180. So you're just every second stride, you're hitting the ground on that. If you were to do everything at 180 beats per minute, we would feel like we're in the 1980s at some sort of new wave club. And that would be wonderful to transport time like that. But again, it's near impossible to kind of keep that up. Being able to go at 90, even if you're looking at, again, a multiple in the 120s, where you're hitting every one side every third, something like that, that works as well. I do think that some of those trying to hit a 12-minute mile by staying on this, that's fine. But I think it's finding your own stride and finding your own stride length, which is the key.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Tony and I were looking at our run analysis on Strava. And Strava, you know, your
Cadence.
cadence. So
Mhm.
I don't even know if that's pretty accurate.
What device are you using it with a phone and with Strava, or are you using it?
With Strava, yeah.
You're using Garmin with Strava?
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty accurate. Yeah, that's going to be, because that has a, it looks at your arm movement, but also looks at impact.
Okay.
So that's pretty accurate. I've used a lot of different stuff. I actually really like the Garmin device for that information. I know that they did have bounce in there at one time as well, but I think the turnover for cadence and Garmin is pretty good.
All right, I have one more question. If you don't have
Yes.
a normal high kick, is there a way to develop it, or is it bad not to have a good kick and you kind of like
So a kick from behind?
on the ground? Like,
No,
you
so
know,
again,
it's like Tony has a really high kick, but mine's more not very high. Is there a way to develop a you know, a higher kick?
So what you're talking about is turnover there. And what I always, with the athletes that I've worked with, we would start in smaller increments to go to longer increments. So understanding that you could, we would do this at a 10-minute mile, a 9-minute mile, all the way until they were fatiguing out as fast as they could go. And the faster that they were going and still staying on that faster turnover, they were seeing a higher kick.
Okay.
If you're running a 11, 12-minute mile, you'll get some kick behind you, but generally that longer kick comes from faster efforts. And so what I would suggest doing is doing that in short increments, going out and doing a faster cadence for 100 yards or 150 or 200 yards, or do it when you guys do track workouts, being able to have something on the track that could that you could do repetitive reps with.
Okay.
I had a question about, you know, slower runs versus faster runs. You know, again, I feel like my stride gets really nice when I go fast, but when I'm just going on an easy run, I'm more up and down. And I just checked my cadence. My cadence is like 178 on the slow runs and 183 on the races or something. So I don't know. I don't know how to get the slower runs, because I think that's where I'm probably just plodding along and maybe getting more injured or something like that.
Okay, so Jerry, let me say you're pretty damn close to perfection there, so I'm sorry for you. So I think, again, on your slower runs, I wouldn't overthink it unless you're feeling jarring effects from the run itself. None of this is a mathematical certainty for training runs. It's a way to be able to diminish injuries and being able to create some comfort when you're doing your runs, or for people who are competing, being able to give some cues to be able to keep their body in better position. It
Yeah.
sounds, I run with you, your cadence is really good. I wouldn't overthink the slower days versus the faster days. I would just think about the fatigue level and being able to use some of the cues such as the reset or the arms, excuse me, to
Okay.
keep your body in proper position.
Yeah, okay.
I hope you guys found this information useful. It does relate to both running, walking, and racing. So I look forward to coming out and doing this in person with you. I'll bring all the tools to the trade and we can have a little fun and have this sound just absolutely annoy the living hell out of the Oak Park residents.
So, if there's no other questions, I just had to make a comment, like, as I was listening to you talk, we've been planning meetings and having meetings for years with many different types of speakers. And I thought, we've never really just said how to run, and this is a running club. And we never just like said, this is how you run, and gone to the basics. And I think this is so great. I hope it was useful to others. I've been running and you always think of all these, I got to race, I got to do this, but the basics, which I think some of us skip right over and we just start running and racing. And so I really appreciated this. It's going to make me think about a lot of things. And I'm like, why didn't we do this meeting like 20 years ago?
Jerry, we've been having meetings for 40 years almost. And this might be one of the best ever. Is Dave's delivery is so nice,
I agree. And
Under
I taped it. I remembered to record it 10 minutes.
Excellent.
I did.
Good job.
Yay.
So a couple of things about if we do this live. One of the things that I do is I bring out my I have an app called Coach's Eye, and that's how I record everybody. And I record everybody running with their shoes on, and then I have everybody take their shoes and socks off, and I record them barefoot. Now, the reason we do that, when I was running in high school and then post-collegiate, what we would do is we would do days on golf courses or on the football field, and we'd run without shoes on. And the idea that our coach would have us is proprioception. It's how your body understands where it is on the ground and why you don't fall over. And so what he would be teaching is intrinsic strength within the feet to be able to do the clawing or pawing, that's a whole different clinic, but being able to do clawing and pawing in order to be able to pull through on your stride, which is, again, it's a different technical clinic, but we record both of those in order for you to understand what you're doing in motion. The other thing is this is applicable to everybody at every level. Before I came onto the call tonight, I was at my son's track meet. He's a junior at Glenbrook South, and I'm screaming at him. Unfortunately, he has me as a father, so he has to deal with that. And I'm saying, get your hips forward. He was running the 32 tonight, and he ran well. He ran about 11 flat, which is decent. And he kept on externally rotating as he's getting deeper into the laps. And I'm like, get your hips forward. And he would go forward, and his stride would smooth out. His chest would go up, and then that would last about 200 meters. And then I would have to say it again. But that's just the way that fatigue works. But this is something I believe in my heart of hearts. I don't know if anybody remembers a triathlete named Peter Reed. Peter won Ironman, I believe, 3 times. And what he would do is he would do his brick workouts where he would go out for a 125-mile ride, followed by a 2-mile run, followed by a 10-minute core session. Ouch. That he would just do, and he would say, it will be your core that will carry you across the finish line. Huh. And whether we are aging athletes or younger athletes, there's no greater truth that could be spoken. So
Very good.
Very good.
thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you,
I'm glad
Dave.
that you enjoyed the information, and I look forward to seeing you all in person sometime soon.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I like Bob's comment, 40 years of meetings, right?
Yeah.
And one
That's
of the
right.
best ever.
And
Very
you know,
good.
I'd like to make it a point. I recall back in the 80s, we'd do the Monday night runs. And one of our premier runners was Ed Hernandez, fast runner. And he'd run 34, 35-minute 10Ks. And his heel would almost hit his butt when he ran. I remember watching him run. He was so smooth and so efficient and so light on his feet. And he has that posture that they were talking about by doing that. And and Jane will attest to that, right, Jane? Very smooth
You're
running.
on mute, Jane. You're on mute, Jane.
Yep.
Yeah, Ed was known for his efficiency, which why he was running well into his 80s and still is running. I haven't watched him run lately, but yeah, he's smooth as ever, and I'm sure his head is level too.
And you remember his leg kick? I remember that. He was very, very, used the whole length of his stride.
Yeah, he made it look easy.
Yeah.
Made it look easy. Like Tony's leg kick is all the way to his glutes.
Yeah.
Well, that-
My cadence is like in the low 160s.
Oh, well, that's something you can improve on then.
Tony, how tall are you?
5'8".
You're 5'8". Yeah, you have what I have, which is what we call short guy syndrome. We feel that the only.
I don't want
So-
I don't want to sound negative here, but the other side of that coin is Arden Swanson, who's a shuffler. He does not have a high.
And he moves.
He's fast shuffler.
Arden is running the same marathon times he ran 20 years ago, and they were all good. 30
So when
years
we
ago. Paul.
If
Pardon
you
me?
look at people like Khalid Kanuchi, he's a shuffler as well. Have very, very short stride. He's probably in the 190s for his turnover. You look at some of my two personal people I go to for perfect form are El Garouche and Haley Gebrselassie. Their forms are just like El Garouche. He's running sub 350 for a mile, and nothing from his waist up moves. I mean, his arms are going. His head is. It's like somebody put a steel rod through him, and his turnover is just flying. But it's so long out behind him. But he's getting that very, very fast turnover. So I unfortunately have to jump because it is 8 o'clock, and my family is just getting home from track, and I am going to go and grab dinner with them. But I can't thank you enough for the
Thank you.
opportunity to speak to you
Oh,
thank
Thank you,
Thank
Dave.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great.
Have a great night.
Bye,
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Bye.
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 Oh, I should stop recording. Let me see. How do I do that?
I'm so glad